The government is considering banning online betting outside of the TAB. It comes as they announced a partnership between UK betting company Entain and the TAB that would see a 50% revenue share. But the Problem Gambling Foundation says it's a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to reducing harm. Andre Frood from the Problem Gambling Foundation joins me now. Andre, thank you so much for joining us and welcome back to the program. What did you make of yesterday's announcement?
Well, it was a bit of a mixed bag. Harm minimisation needs to be at the very forefront of this deal, but we're really not sure about the details and not sure what that's going to look like because it was pretty light on detail, but it absolutely needs to be at the forefront so that we don't see more harm. And we're really concerned about Entain's track record. They faced a raft of regulatory failings and fines for regulatory failings. Can we really trust them to bring, world-class harm minimisation practice to protect Kiwis?
One of the things that was announced yesterday in that announcement was the $5 million boost to gambling harm minimisation. That's obviously one of the positives that came out of that announcement.
Absolutely. And look, that is a good thing. But again, what will that look like? Are we going to have the right people around the table? It needs to be evidence-based. It needs to have the voice of people with lived experience. This is about people being harmed, people whose lives have been turned upside down because this is a harmful product. So we need to make sure that it's evidence-based, that it will protect consumers and have those people with it expertise around the table.
Well, you talk about not a lot of detail, and I wonder whether that's part of the issue as well, is that this announcement has come $5 million, but do you know how it's going to be distributed? Do we know any of that detail yet?
No, that's exactly right. And harm minimisation was mentioned many times in the announcement, which is great. But what will it look like? You can't just have the industry coming and saying they're going to bring in world-class host responsibility. What is that? And, we need to make sure that it ticks all the boxes and then it will protect Kiwis from harm, because it is a really harmful form of gambling.
One of the other announcements that came out as well is that the government's considering prohibiting online betting outside of the TAB. Does that have any impact at all here in New Zealand when it comes to gambling?
Well, look, it could. I guess it's one part of it that could stop people being harmed through offshore sites, because that's particularly risky. It's always better that people are protected by New Zealand law, so that's a good thing. But we just need to make sure that those regulations are really tight and that that's supported by, compliance and monitoring and stiff penalties if those regulations are breached.
Talk to me about the pokie machines, because there was also an announcement about that. How bad are we when it comes to pokie machines? I shouldn't say bad, but talk to me about pokie machines and the harm that they cause, but also that this announcement, there was positive towards that as well.
Yes, absolutely. And that was one of the good things that came out of this. I mean, pokie machines are still the most harmful form of gambling. They're highly addictive. We've got a lot of them in our community. So having 500 less, that's a really good thing, and it's a positive step.
What is your biggest concern with what was announced yesterday?
It's harm, and we're seeing more people present with harm from online gambling. We know how easy it is to hide it. It's available 24/7. You carry it around in your pocket. And, people, when they get harmed, sometimes at the very severe end, they've lost their homes, relationships, lost their jobs, maybe committed fraud. So we don't want to see an increase in harm.
As you say, this was a mixed bag yesterday, wasn't it? There's a number of announcements that were positive, but a number where there's still question marks around regulations, etc.
Yeah, and we really want to see regulations, things in place that will stop people being harmed, advertising and sponsorship. We don't want to see New Zealanders being bombarded with advertisements. The TAB sent out an email last night to their database saying that people will now have access to a range of Entain's product offerings. Well, what's that going to look like? What will that be? And we need to make sure people can exclude from online gambling. That they can maybe set mandatory deposit limits so they don't spend more than they can afford. There's a raft of measures that we need to see to make sure that people are protected.
Andre, it's always a pleasure to have you join us here on the show. We thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Jenny May.
Andre Frood from the Problem Problem Gambling Foundation. Tēnā koe.